Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at the Fez Agency. Did you all know that Portugal is currently ranked the #1 country in the world for remote workers? Yeah, that's right, #1 in the entire world. With the beautiful weather mixed with the history, friendly people, incredible coastline, and awesome cuisine, it is really easy to understand why. And in fact, some of our most popular episodes here on About Abroad are about Portugal. So I already know that you all love it, and I'm not going to waste your time trying to convince you to go visit. But what I will try to convince you of is planning your next company retreat there. And when you do, to use the Fez Agency. Fez Agency is local, right there from Porto, with people on the ground to help you plan your company retreat. They can map out every single detail of your offsite anywhere in the country of Portugal. So that way you can arrive, you can unwind and recharge with your teammates without the stress. You all know you love it there. I know you'll love it there. So let's get your team there. And the next time you're planning a company offsite, consider Portugal and then contact my friends over at the Fez Agency to make it happen. You can visit them via the link in the show notes. My guest today is Andrew Williams. He joins me as the founder of Remote Tribe and is just one of those all-round great digital nomads that is in love with traveling the world and sharing how to do that at a very high level with the rest of the world. So we had a blast. We just kind of nerded out on being a digital nomad and what the future of work looks like and the future of travel for people who want to call different parts of the world home. A lot of fun talking with Andrew. I'll let you guys dive right into it and enjoy it as much as I did. Please help me in welcoming Andrew to About Abroad. Yeah, man. So it's a little early there for you this morning. We're both sipping on coffee, getting this thing started. I expect good things, but powered by coffee for sure.
Yeah, I guess it's chilly there as well where you are in France, right?
Yeah, exactly. I've just made the transition from Spain up to France, so I'm dealing with a little bit colder weather, but you know, it's getting better as we speak. I'm happy. I'm enjoying the new scenery.
Are you south or north of France?
I'm in the south. I'm like just north of the border of Spain, actually.
Yeah,
so
that's a good spot. Yeah.
French Catalonia, which I don't know if you did, like, do you think it's a well-known thing that Catalonia extends into France?
No, I actually didn't know it myself.
Yeah, I think it's I feel like I have known this. I've spent a good bit of time in Spain, so maybe I kind of knew this in the back of my head, but I know, like, you know, for most of my life, and probably most people think that Catalonia we just associate it with Spain, right? Like, oh, it's that area where Barcelona is that wants to secede from Spain, and that's what people think of. But I guess, like, traditionally, I'm no expert on this at all, but traditionally, Catalonia was more like a region, kind of like Basque Country, also sort of a region, and the border between Spain and France is a relatively new thing. So
it got split, yeah.
Yeah, it got split. And so it's weird, like here, people speak Catalan. Like the road signs are written in Catalan in this part of France. The second language is Catalan. People speak French, but they also speak Catalan. And I even met a French guy who identified himself as Catalan. Like he was like, oh no, I'm Catalan. Like, but you're from France. He's like, yeah, I'm Catalan first. I thought it was super cool. I don't know. You're a world traveler. You're a digital nomad at heart. So like, I know that these kind of things probably appeal to you. But for me, I totally nerd out on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in Europe, it's pretty common. You've got like a lot of people mixed now, a lot of different nationalities getting married and stuff like that. So Europe is pretty global, so to say. So.
Yeah, it's a little like globe in a continent in a lot of ways. You're sort of the product of that, right? Like you're from, like, where do you tell people you're from? I mean,
Yes, I mean, usually I tell people, I mean, usually I don't want to talk about that, but I mean, if someone is really, really curious, I just tell them, you know, I'm half Romanian, half British. I've been split between the two countries, so I grew up traveling a lot and then also studied abroad, so quite international international since a young age, I would say.
Wow. Yeah. Do you think it was sort of like in your blood from the beginning then, to like you were kind of predestined to go off and become a bit of a global
I don't
citizen?
think so. It was just circumstances. And I think, globalization now is hitting everywhere. So more and more people are traveling everywhere. We're pretty lucky to do that. I mean, the ones that can are really lucky, to just choose where they want to live and work. It is pretty amazing. But I just think it gave me the courage to travel and meet people. A lot of people tell me, oh, I don't know how you can do that. You're very courageous. I could never do that. But it's kind of a limiting belief, and why being stuck to a place when there's so many other nice things to see in the world? Just a waste.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think the limiting beliefs are for, like why do we generally, I mean, there, digital nomads and expats, people who are like traveling the world a lot, like still a small fraction of the global population.
Yeah.
Like, even though that fraction has, maybe 10x'd in the last year or two or three or whatever, it's still a small fraction of the global population. Like what do you think the limiting belief comes from for the general pop?
It's a very good question. I never thought about it, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people are limited to, the place they grow up. I think it's just out of security and safety, most of all, if you go down to the root cause, and just convenience. I mean, it's not easy to travel 12 hours on the other side of the globe where you don't speak the language, and it's really weird. Like from Europe, you go to a place like South Korea or Japan, and then you're in a different world. But yeah, I think it's more a thing about convenience and education in the end, education in the way that, like family growing up and upbringing and all that stuff. But I think it will change a lot. Like, I think it will change a lot. Like, the new generation is growing up really internationally, especially in the big cities. So people move around, they meet new cultures, so they're going to become more curious. It's hard to tell, how it's going to be like, but you're always going to have, more people on the national side who just don't want to leave the country, and then more people on the international side who want to discover. It's hard to tell who is who, but
yeah. What drives you? I'm curious. Like what I always think about the push pull factors. Like, were you pushed to go see the rest of the world? Like some people just like felt like, okay, I got to get out of where I am. I need to go see somewhere else. Or some people are just like that, light at the end of the tunnel that they can't, help but walk towards. Like, where do you fall on the spectrum?
Yeah, I think I was mostly pulled because I'm a very curious person. I used to read a lot when I was younger, and my parents had a lot of books in the library. So I think out of curiosity, I just want to discover more and more. It's kind of like a drug, like a nice drug, where you want to see more. And as you go older, I think you want to discover more and more. So yeah, that's it. I think I'm just fascinated by different cultures and different people. It can be tiring sometimes, but I think it's very, very rewarding.
Yeah, I totally agree. And can relate to that. Like, I actually didn't leave my home country in the US until I was 18. And I mean, so I didn't have this like origin story as like a traveling family or something like that, which is kind of interesting. I was like, my parents were a flight attendant and a pilot. So like in a lot of ways, I was thinking, you would think that I was set up for travel success, I guess, but I wasn't. And then all of a sudden, like I just got a little taste of it, and kind of like you said, it was like drugs. Like I had someone on the podcast recently who said that they felt like they came alive for the first time, like they were seeing life for the first time. I think they went to Italy and, tasted Italian wine for the first time. They're maybe 16, 17, 18 years old, like had wine, heard Italian, tasted, the food, and was just like, oh my God, I'm actually alive for the first time ever. And I thought that was a really...
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best gains you get from travel is it gets you out of the comfort zone. So you have to start developing your own, persona, I would say. So you learn a new language, you see a different way of cooking or speaking another language, which is pretty amazing. I mean, in Europe, it's pretty... As a European, you're used to all these different cultures because you just take a train like 2 hours and then you're in a different country. But if you come from the States or Australia or Africa, probably it's so much different.
Yeah. The space thing is so strange how that morphs your vantage point of like what reality is in terms of travel. Because I mean, like you just said, if you travel a couple hours by train or a quick Ryanair flight across Europe, you can be in a whole new world in a matter of an hour or two. And me from the States, we used to drive 15 hours in a day to get from North Carolina to Florida to go visit family. And like not that much changed.
Yeah, that's the cool part about Europe. That's why I love it. It's still so different. It's amazing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your background because I'm curious. I know you as this guy who owns and started Remote Tribe, and I follow the content that you create. And we're going to talk about that, of course. But I really don't know your background at all, sort of like how you got started in this world and some of the places you've lived or traveled to. So I'm just going to open it up super broad. Like, tell us a little bit about your past and history and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in digital marketing for about 12 years now. I started working in small agencies in Scandinavia, and then I moved to Central Europe and Western Europe. And it was mostly about, optimizing the websites and analyzing the data for the clients and stuff like that. So I really got into digital marketing since I was young. I also have a computer science background. And then it was pretty straightforward after that to, go into consultancy, get some clients, start working for myself. I found that again very liberating, just like a digital nomad, to be able to make your own money and not depend on a job. So I started doing that. I worked as a consultant for a few companies. Some of them were, for example, like co-working spaces, real estate agencies, e-commerce businesses. So I've done consulting for a lot of these clients. And then I saw the trend coming up on, basically decentralizing your life by working in a co-working space, living in a co-living space and stuff like that. So that was upcoming, and I think COVID just accelerated that. And that's the moment when COVID hit and I saw people start working from home. I was sure that's going to open a new Pandora box. So it did actually. And we see now companies, even like Airbnb, they don't call you in the office anymore. They don't have, they have an HQ, but it's not used for having people every day. So then I knew something big is coming. So I started this platform and it's actually a community as well on social media for digital nomads and also remote workers and expats, I would say. We've got a lot of expats being interested in our content. And we're trying to educate people and inform people about what's out there in terms of topics like the visa, where to work from, co-working spaces, the best co-living spaces there in the world. I lived in some and I worked in some, but not in all of them, obviously. Not yet. And we're trying to spread out the word and tell people that it's possible. There are a lot of limiting beliefs as well when it comes to how to work remotely. There are a lot of jobs, including jobs in the medical sector, that you can actually do online, like some kind of online nurses. I don't know exactly how it's called. They're, like we've got lawyers working remotely, setting up remote companies. It's pretty amazing. So sky's the limit. Obviously, in my view, I don't think we're going to have all the companies being fully distributed in the future, because you still need, you're going to have artists and workshops and doctors who are not able to work remotely, but you'll have a lot of jobs coming up fully remotely, I'm sure, and more startups becoming even more distributed.
Yeah, this is the most fascinating part for me is like, of course, there's all these tech companies that have been working remotely for some time and leveraging technology that...
Not all of them and not fully, but I think now it's getting better, yeah.
Yeah, no. I think what's interesting though is like there have been those companies there, but they've been little startups and little teams relatively. And now you're seeing big tech companies like Airbnb, for instance. And then even more fascinating, I think, is like the more traditional jobs, like you talk about with like doctors and nurses and lawyers. These kinds of jobs moving to a remote setting really opens up this Pandora's box.
Yeah, it's true. And Airbnb is making a huge announcement today. I don't know exactly what it is. I haven't checked, but they might release a new product around remote working. So it's really going mainstream. It's true that, I think a lot of people knew that this way of working was really, the old way of working was really archaic. And there was, that comes from the industrial age mostly, or from the 50s with your cubicles.
Can you explain that? Can you, for like, I love this analogy, but for somebody that doesn't know the analogy, can you like elaborate on that? I think it's fascinating.
Sure. So I think that the way we used to work until 2 years ago was probably set up in the 50s, where you were using a lot of paper. You had to be there in person. You had all these people carrying papers. You didn't have computers. You didn't have a lot of things. We weren't so productive before, and we didn't have internet, which makes a huge difference. So I think we were stuck in that mindset, and a lot of companies still are. I think it's a cultural thing around companies, and mostly the established companies like the blue chips, where they still want people in the office, and they think that presence is a thing. People must be in there. Again, it's very interesting because it's kind of a limiting belief at the corporate level. And it all comes down from the top, I think. Like, if you have a CEO with vision and that can create a company, a good culture in a remote company, or like a remote company with a good culture, then again, they will understand there is no need for an office. So I think it was time for a change. Now it's happening, and it's really good news. I mean, sometimes a few years back, I was in some offices with this like really, really bad neon light, and it was really sunny outside in London, and I was just thinking, why am I here? I don't have to be here. I've got the internet anywhere in the world, especially in south of France.
Yeah, where there's sunshine. When there's sunshine in London, you don't want to be sitting under the neon lights inside, right?
Yeah. Well, how do you see the revolution, Chase?
I think it's super interesting, the analogy you made about the Industrial Revolution, and I've one of my favorites is this comparison to the different revolutions that we've had over the course of human history. So you started with like the agricultural revolution, which took hunter-gatherers and moved them to more of like a sedentary lifestyle, which some would argue actually like they went from this like tribal nomadic setting to, okay, we're going to be sedentary, which is good because we always have food and that's great. But on the flip side of that, people became more sedentary. They actually started working a lot harder. So there's arguments to be made that the agricultural revolution actually took us back a step in terms of like what we would call today work-life balance or work-life integration. And then moving to the next phase was like the industrial revolution and like, assembly lines and 40-hour work week and showing up to the factory. And so then this next step is like, is it the remote revolution where you have, you use the internet, you work from wherever you want, maybe the 4-day work week or the who cares how many hours or days a week you work, as long as you get your work done thing becomes a reality and more the norm than the exception. So I'm hopeful for that.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Let's see where that goes, because it might be. I hope it's not going to be a disappointment for a lot of people, and we're not going back to something like the office. Honestly, I hope it's going to evolve into something really nice, like mini communities, like rural communities. That's how I see it going. I see the cities losing a lot of importance in the world in the way that like in terms of demographic and opportunities, because now opportunities are everywhere basically online. One thing you raised there very well is, I think, around the industrial revolution and the factory working hours. Like we have an 8-hour working day because there were 3 shifts of 8 hours. So that's 24 hours. And I mean, if you think about that, it's so obsolete. It's basically like I talk with a lot of friends and they're productive mostly maybe 3-4 hours a day, and then they just take breaks because there's no point. So that's another thing which I'm happy we're getting rid of, like staying 8 hours in a workplace when probably you're more productive like 3 or 4.
I saw a statistic once that
and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, come on, just chill.
Yeah, there's 2 things to point out here. Like one is that, as you said, 3 hours. Like the average in-office worker is productive for about 2.5 to 3 hours per day. That's when they're actually getting work done. The rest is like a mixture of breaks and
meetings or whatever.
Meetings and just basically you're just present and you're getting paid for those 5 hours. The other one is that we've like 50x'd our productivity over the last 100 years because of technology and all kinds of things that we have at our disposal, but we've maintained this same input of hours per week that we're supposed to work. So that doesn't like what's the point in becoming so much more productive if we're not going to get some of that time back? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a legacy thing or most likely a control thing. Maybe it's a way of controlling people, and I mean it can be dangerous for a lot of companies, I guess, for people to so that they're more free because they have more choices. So I never. It's also a mystery for me why we are so more productive these days and we still have to work 8 hours a day. I don't understand that. If someone can explain after the podcast, I'll be really happy.
Yeah, I think it's corporate greed. I mean, not to sound like all like anti-capitalist or something. Like I'm all for making money and profiting and things like that. But like it's just like, oh well, why not keep squeezing more out of the turnip if we can? Like there's more to be gained here.
Yeah, probably that's it. Yeah, it's the race. Yeah, and you also have a lot of competition.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think a lot of us are just waking up to the fact that, like, obviously, it's a little cliche to say, like, oh, there's more to life than work and stuff. But taking that a bit further now and just saying, like, but really, like, what can we do with all this extra time that we've gained and this freedom, to live like you're living and to, like, whatever it is. It's not travel and exploring for everybody, but
can be hobbies, can be family time. Sure,
it can be investing in your community. There's so many things we can do that, that will serve us further down the road, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you something, but I forgot. Yeah, just go ahead.
I've got a million questions too. I'm sure we'll get to like 10% of them. You mentioned the rural communities, and I also am on that train with you, which I think is a very cool spin-off of this whole remote revolution and digital nomads and things like this, is that a lot of these rural communities, this is a big thing in Spain, that there's been this brain drain from the rural communities. The cities have absorbed all the brain power, all the talent has migrated away, and therefore, these communities are dying. You've got villages that you can buy for $100 because they're just decrepit and falling apart. And so anyway, I think the revitalization of these areas is going to be a really cool thing. And I would love to see digital nomads, expats, people who want to like go in and invest and live in a community, put themselves there and see what they can do for those local areas.
I think that's coming as well. I have a feeling that's going to happen in the next 10 years. I think people will flock to cities, not all of them, but I think cities will become more and more expensive with inflation, and quality of life is usually not the best inside the cities. And now you can actually organize communities outside. It's going to be like our grandparents used to live, but with internet and separate rooms probably. And there's a big awareness now about, organic food and organic things. So it does make sense that people try and grow their own food or grow it with the community. It's interesting. It's like we might be going back to a different type of living that we used to do before, just because of the current economic, social situations in most of the Western countries. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe I like to see the positive things in things, because, that would mean upgrade in life. And if people are happier that way, why not? It doesn't matter. Like maybe it's okay to have less money, but have a stress-free life. You can live more, enjoy your family more in community.
Sounds pretty idyllic, actually. Like, it sounds like that shouldn't be counterintuitive, but it is.
Yeah, especially nowadays. Yeah, exactly. Where everyone is running after the money on the hamster wheel.
Yeah, exactly. Do you feel like you got off the hamster wheel, or like were you ever on it, and or are you off it yet?
Yeah, I was a bit. I was in the corporate life for a few years, and honestly, I didn't like it that much, because the corporate life attracts a specific type of people. I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to do. Like, you definitely can have a corporate career. It's just that feels like, people have to do certain things because everyone else is doing it. So, I wasn't built that way. And, also I feel like you're kind of trapped because you can't say whatever you think. There's a specific conduct, and in some companies it's really bad. So you can't really say things. So I was there and I didn't like it. So obviously I decided not to stay.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the norm for a lot of people, right? Like you got a little taste of it, probably just because society told us that's what you thought you were supposed to do, and then you go, wait a second, this doesn't feel right. What do I need to do differently?
Yeah, exactly.
We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This season is brought to you by my good friends over at Insured Nomads. They're the absolute best in the business when it comes to providing health, travel, and medical insurance for nomads, expats, and really just all forms of world travelers. I know insurance is often something that's overlooked when we're fantasizing about traveling the world, but it's absolutely necessity that we address this, because often the policy you have in your home country isn't going to cover you while you're abroad. And it's also a requirement, as a lot of people may not realize, to actually buy private travel or expat insurance, as it's called sometimes, to obtain a visa or even enter certain countries. So fortunately, there are companies like Insured Nomads to help us with this. Not only do they have excellent coverage and great prices, but they're also providing a first-class experience with additional perks and best-in-class technology via their app. It's an amazing experience. I can't recommend it enough. Now, this is a company that was built by world travelers for world travelers. So they know what it's like to find yourself in a difficult medical situation abroad, and they want to keep you from having that same bad experience. So the next time you're planning a trip abroad, whether it's for a week or a lifetime, check out Insured Nomads via the link in the show notes. Hey guys, so many of you write in asking how to support the show best. And if you are listening and made it this far into the episode, then I'm going to presume that perhaps you're one of those people that wants to help. So if that's the case, the best thing you could do right now would be to open up the app that you're currently using to listen to this episode. Go to the little arrow thing that allows you to share, select it, and share it to one of your social media networks. That would be a huge, huge help. You can feel free to tag me at DC Warrington, and I'll slap you a virtual high five from wherever I am in the world. Thank you so much for the support. We really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy listening to the rest of this episode.
did you work in a corporate environment before, Chase?
Yeah, kind of. I'm always kind of skeptical to call it corporate because it was not the industry that I was in was very corporate in like finance and insurance, but the company I worked for was really, really great and forward thinking, especially for like an American company. They were just all did have an emphasis on work-life balance and time off and things like that. So I was not in a super corporate environment, but I did wear, like a blazer and tie or suit and tie a lot of days of the week and traveled a lot for work. But I was always remote. So I never worked in an office. And that was always really important to me. I just thought that at the time, that was like the pinnacle of what like the closest thing I could get to location independence, 13 years ago or whatever. And
was it a sales job, Chase, or?
No, but it was a relationship job.
Okay.
So it was, I was traveling a lot. I was meeting with our customers. I was on the road a good bit and working from home and, working from coffee shops and stuff. So I did get like that sense of what it meant to, I guess it was some form of like a digital nomad, or I got my training wheels in digital nomadism there. And then later it became more of a thing where I was like, I just have to have real location independence and not be like limited to a state or a country even. Like I just need to be able to go where I want to go. That became my priority number one.
Yeah. So how did you get out of did you have a plan, or how did you get out of the corporate life basically?
Sketchy plan. Yeah. I mean, my wife and I were in the same boat. We were both like wanting that location independence, but also just thinking like that really probably wasn't attainable, which I mean, it almost wasn't at that time, but we knew we had to try to get as close as we could. So we did like a staggered approach. She quit her job, started an online business. Then a year and a half later, when that was somewhat stable, like it feels weird to say stable now, but somewhat stable, we had a little revenue coming in to support us. We moved to Latin America and I quit my job. We started on that path together, and then I eventually landed at Do It. So since that point, 7 or 8 years ago, it's been full location independence.
Nice, well done.
Yeah,
that sounds like what would be your advice for people who want to build a location independent lifestyle? I can tell them mine, but I'm just curious about yours.
Oh, I'm super curious to hear yours. My initial feedback whenever somebody asks me that is that you have to be willing to take one big step back to take 2 steps forward. And so if you just can go ahead and bite the bullet and say, I know that eventually I'm going to get to where I want to get to. I believe you will if you have that determination and you make that your priority. But you just commit to yourself that, okay, I'm going to be willing to take a step back. I'm going to make some sacrifices on day one, but in 1 year from now, I'm going to be where I really want to be. And from there on out, it'll just be an upward trajectory. That's my advice to people.
Yeah, I mean, my advice would be to plan a bit and also try to, have delayed gratification in mind when you do that, because it's not going to happen overnight. So it's going to take probably 1 or 2 years, and you'll probably need some cash reserves as well, unless you have like an online job already, a remote job, which you can do. By the way, we've got remote jobs on our website, so just go there and get one.
What's the URL?
It's remotetribe.live/remote jobs.
Cool. We'll include that in the show notes, of course.
That's great. Yeah. So I would say that's one important thing to plan a bit ahead and have some cash reserves. And the second one is, if you have a partner, make sure it's the right person, because you both need the same mindset. You have to take some risks. Honestly, I think today it's risky even to have a job, especially in the Western countries where things are getting wobbly right now. So I think the risk is less nowadays. And now with the online job marketing opening up and having so many remote jobs, I think it's easier than ever to make that step. So, just go ahead, at least try it, give it a try, see if you can do it and if you like it. And then, sky's the limit, I guess.
Have you met many people that tried and wanted to continue, but couldn't? Like that. Another way to ask that question is, do you think a lot of people that make that commitment end up unhappy with that decision? No,
I don't think so. What I noticed is a lot of people wanted to settle down at one point in a specific place. So they kind of quit this lifestyle, and obviously they still kept traveling, but they kind of settled down in a place they liked. But I never met someone who was sorry about that. Like everyone was very grateful, and they have amazing experiences.
Yeah, I agree. That's generally been my experience as well. Like people, most of the time, if they make that leap of faith, they're happy with the decision, even if they do end up deciding that that lifestyle wasn't for them. They returned back to where they started. They're happy that they made the decision and, made the short-term sacrifice to at least have the experience.
So Chase, because you had you and your wife have experience with starting online businesses, like what would be, like the top 3 advice for people who want to start an online business for our audience?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Well, I will be honest. My wife Allison is more the expert. I was on her gravy train there, I guess, in a way. She started Etsy shops, and so just to be like 100% clear and transparent with people, like it's not like we set up some sweet e-commerce business all on our own that made millions, or some Amazon shop that did really well. No, we had like a couple Etsy shops that worked well for us, that supported our lifestyle for traveling for a couple years, and it was sufficient. But we weren't lighting the world on fire either. But my advice to people starts first of all with having a plan. It's just like any business. Have a business plan, know who your audience is, know who you're trying to speak to. Also, if you're sourcing materials and you want to be a digital nomad, be very cautious and very detailed in your approach to this, because depending on where you are, sourcing materials can change quite a bit. And especially like if you think about things like, for instance, photography and things like this, if you have, let's say you're making widgets and you use some certain type of plastic, and you're in Peru at the time, and that you're sourcing your plastic from Peru, and then you move over and you're living in Italy, that plastic might change. And now you're sourcing that same plastic. It looks similar, but it's pretty different in photos. Now you have to go back and change all your photos. So you have to be really cognizant of these little details, because the product will change. You're selling products. And my third piece of advice is to outsource your weaknesses. So whatever don't try to be everything to everyone. You're probably not good at all of the details of running a business. So if you're not a web designer, don't be your own web designer. If you're not an SEO person, don't be your own SEO person. If you're not an accounting person, find an accountant. It's impossible to be really good at all those.
Yeah, and it's hard to scale because you're always going to be trapped into this kind of tasks, like admin tasks or things that you don't know how to do, and you're going to lose a lot of time on those ones. So you rather outsource them if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the 4-hour work week mentality, right? Like just like outsource the things that you're not good at so you can focus on what you're really good at.
Yeah, and there's so many places to do it right now. You can hire contractors online. You've got Fiverr, you've got Upwork. So there are really ways around things that you can do,
and relatively cheap too. Like you can actually, if you can figure out, this is also from the 4-hour work week, like if you can figure out what you're worth hourly, right? So let's say you do your month. Okay, this is how much I make a month, and after expenses, this is how much I pay myself. So I make $25 an hour.
Yeah.
Theoretically, anything less than $25 an hour that cost you less than, or that you can pay someone else to do for less than $25 an hour, you should pay them to do. And if you take that mentality and you start applying that, it can really work out for you, I think, in the long run. For instance, with this podcast, I can't do it all. And there's an awesome team behind me that's doing a bunch of the details that they're better at than me. And it makes me do what I do best. And so, I don't know, it's a positive flywheel if you get it spinning in the right direction.
I mean, what was the commonality of the online entrepreneurs you met so far? Like, what was their point of success? The main traits that they had.
Do you know Mitko Krashovsky from That Remote Life by any chance? He's been on the podcast. He has his own
Mitko.
podcast.
Yeah. I think I'm following him on Twitter. Yeah,
probably. He's awesome at this. This is what he really dives into on That Remote Life. His podcast is like online entrepreneurs, and he's even got a company called Parable that focuses on successful online entrepreneurs and does like deep case studies on them, and the trigger points, the inflection points when companies really took off and what made that happen, and it's just like packed full of tons of information. So for anybody like deeply interested in that question, I would defer to Mitko and That Remote Life, because he does it well.
Nice one. Yeah, I'll definitely check him out. I follow him, but I never had time to listen for the podcast, but it seems like I should.
Yeah, he's a good one. Do you have any particular advice yourself?
I do actually. So I mean, obviously, it also depends a lot on the type of business you want to start, but you have to start early and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. It's true. And things don't turn up as they should most of the time. So you might be pivoting a few times. So that's why it's really good to start early. I think that's one of my best advices. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, like experiment with, different social media channels, different content, different product types. You have to do that. Obviously, you have to know your market very well too, but start early, start building your audience, start being out there. A lot of people, and also just be patient. It takes years, honestly. Like most of the people I talked to, it got them like 1, 2, up to 3 or 5 years to have a successful business. So yeah, I mean, this instant gratification is terrible we have these days with the social media, and I don't know. Like it's sometimes I feel like we live in a big lie where everyone seems so successful, but in fact, they're not.
We're all imposters, man. That is something I've learned. I don't know if you see that as well, but it's like everybody has some imposter syndrome if they're doing anything even a little bit challenging, I think. And we all are trying to figure out how to not be feeling impostery. But
yeah, some people call it the BS economy these days. So it feels like it.
I hadn't heard that. I love it.
Yeah. And there's a really great book called The BS Jobs. It's written by a guy who I think really hates the corporate environment. And, he actually pinpoints why a lot of jobs are BS. It's a brilliant book. People should read it. It's definitely great.
What would be an example?
First of all, that you don't need 8 hours to do your job. And second, I think it's all about these jobs that, they're basically like middle management. They're useless in most of the cases. And they're just to, just to be there. Like, a lot of secretarial jobs are useless as well. So a lot of things can be done by one person, so you don't actually need so many people. But yeah, I guess everyone knows who worked in big companies that they're not very efficient.
Yeah, there's a lot of waste in the process, I think.
Yeah, but it's a great book, and he wrote a few books about the working environment. He's a very interesting guy.
Cool. I gotta check that out. I love that there's like more and more content out there that sounds like you and I overlap a lot on, and things that we'd like to digest and think about and talk about.
Absolutely.
I would love to return to the Remote Tribe and talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing there, and just to give people a feel for what the site is all about, and then maybe go a little bit deeper on some of the things that you're really digging in.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we write content for aspiring digital nomads and for remote workers in general. It can be anything from co-working spaces, co-living spaces, to how to build a business online, what cards you can use whilst you travel so you save up money. So a bit of everything in regards to remote working and remote lifestyle. We also have a section with remote jobs, which we launched recently, where you can go and, if you want a job in IT, marketing, sales, we've got, I think, over 1,000 jobs right now. So people can just go there and apply. There's a job for anyone, really. So we're trying to push that bit as well now, because I think it makes sense to have a job portal inside our platform. And then we're building something on the side. I can't really talk more about it right now, but we're trying to build something bigger on the side. We also have a nice Instagram community where people interact with our content, and I'm really happy to see that. And also my LinkedIn is pretty packed with info. So just follow us, either the company profile or my LinkedIn. A lot of interesting discussions about the future of work are happening on LinkedIn. So you should definitely be there. Just don't mind the clickbaits and the emotional posts. Just ignore that and just follow the right people and the right content. There's great content, very interesting people on LinkedIn, definitely, and just connect with people.
Yeah, LinkedIn get a bad rap, I think, for a long time, and I've returned to it because I actually really enjoy the interactions there. And like you said, if you ignore the junk that's there, there's a lot of really good conversations. And I think that's the key, is that they're like in-depth conversations. I get Twitter, and I understand, like, in other forms of social media where you have these quick interactions, but I think I've become so accustomed to working asynchronously via the written form with my teammates and partners and things like that I really enjoy the long form, the more depth that you get from the conversation there.
Definitely. Just follow the right people. I mean, I do unfollow people as well, it's true, because as soon as I see something which is not in part of the industry, or if it's not professional or related to what I'm doing, I just unfollow, because it would be just a waste of time.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid. Just everything is at the touch of a button these days. So
Yeah, exactly. It's really cool what you guys are doing at Remote Tribe. I love the content you guys put out there. And I think it's really cool. I actually didn't know that there was such a big community forming and or also about the job board, which I think is so vital these days. I think back to, you asked me earlier, like, kind of about my beginnings in this world. And I've mentioned it here on the podcast before, but like my wife found my job on a Pinterest board, like my initial job at Doist, where you're like, how did, like, there weren't location independent jobs.
These kind of niche channels here where you could find these kind of remote jobs. I've heard about these stories. Very, very interesting. You're one of them.
Well, I think it's great now that there's like websites like yours that are like literally it's a jobs board, remote jobs, and like that's an amazing thing. And you have over 1,000 on there. Like that's insane.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot more other websites on the internet. I think there are at least 20 solid websites where people can go and get a job. It's been democratized a lot, to be frank, lately. Like it's definitely going mainstream. And I agree, it was really hard. Like I was lucky to go in consulting and get my contracts, and that was location independent, in the last 6 years. But yeah, it was hard. I agree. It was really hard before.
Are there any particular trends that you're seeing that are like emerging in the digital nomad space or remote workspace that could be useful for the audience? Like something that's kind of like coming up on the horizon?
Yeah, I think this kind of workations or, remote vacations, so to say, workations are coming up. So, people going to these camps, remote camps, where they meet people, they work and they learn. Usually they're 2 weeks long or a month long. And then you go there and you might be traveling during that time, but you work together with new people. You could be working on your project. You do activities together. You learn maybe a new language. So they take care of you. So I think that's really upcoming in terms of trends. Also, I think, again, like, I think travel will be changing. I think people will stay longer on their holidays. I think Airbnb has made a study on that, and they were saying that the average stay has increased, the number of days in a stay in Airbnb. So I think people will actually spend more time on so-called holidays, but they might be working as well. So it's going to be more of a mix between the two. Workation type, yeah, exactly. And I think, again, rural tourism I think it's going to skyrocket soon. Also, slow travel is a thing. We see more trends on that, slow traveling. So that means you basically go in a location like in a smaller village or a smaller city, and then you just immerse yourself in the local culture. And you basically spend maybe 2 or 3 weeks more or less in the same place, doing small trips around that place. So you learn more by seeing less, something like that, which is very interesting concept. Also, this conscious traveling is coming strong. People want to live in nature in like these eco resorts, using less and less materials and goods, and just contributing to less, I guess, emissions and waste.
Yeah. Smaller living, more sustainable.
Yeah. Minimalism is also a thing. Like I see people, obviously it's really hard to buy a flat right now in a lot of big cities. So I think the renting model is a thing, unfortunately. It does have advantages as well, but I think you'll see more and more people living minimalistic in the future. Yeah, definitely. I don't know if it's a social economic thing or just that's the trend of, the lifestyle we're living at the moment.
Yeah. I think also the emergence of all these, digital nomad visas and such that are opening up the opportunity to stay in places
more than a month or 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something to
It's
add
definitely
in.
a trend. Like we see a lot of countries releasing these visas, but some of them are really complicated to get and it takes a lot of time and you need a really high income. So it's like, for example, for Greece, I think you need at least $3,000 a month or maybe $4,000. I think Brazil is a really, really nice one. You have to prove about $1,200 per month income. It's not that bureaucratic to get one, so it's pretty easy. But yeah, some of them have really high requirements, but it's still good. It's happening. Like I'm really happy to see governments coming up with that because they see income in digital nomads. So
yeah, somebody on here on the show earlier was talking about how like he helped kind of create some of the digital nomad visas, and he was like talking about us like we were like people applying like they were users of a product or like reader, subscribers to a newsletter. Like it's like a business funnel.
Yeah, it's kind of like an expat service for digital nomads because digital nomads are in one way expats, so they need the certain type of service, which is the digital nomad visa, I guess.
Yeah. I think what Gonzalo Hall is doing with Madeira and some of the other digital nomad communities, he makes a really good point often that like, yeah, that's all great. Like you can provide the visa, the mechanism by which you can go stay in a place for a long period of time. But without the infrastructure and the community there, like we could, make that a bit more realistic, like without a co-working space and really good Wi-Fi and other people around you who are like-minded.
And facilities that make people stay. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you need all that stuff too.
Yeah. One thing I noticed in these co-living places is that you actually need a good community, as you're saying. That's one, very important. And two, you need good facilities so people hang around and they socialize even more. The problem is a lot of co-living companies are trying to make a co-living look like, I don't know if they're trying or they're not trying, but they're making people feel like they're either in a hotel or in a shared space, which is not the point. You need events, you need community managers, and you also need a bunch of people. Like if you're just 6-10 people in a house, I don't think it's enough to build a community, because probably half of the people will be away most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think's the right number? Is it more like 30, 40, something like that?
Yeah, I think everything over, 50 would be good. Even 50 might be too less, but I think anything over 50, depending on the location and the facilities, again, it's hard. Like if you don't live in a big city where you can have a block or something, it's hard to put so many people together. But I still think it's possible. I think it's still possible in the rural environment too.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's a big thing that's coming is more, and you've already touched on this some, like those co-living or workcation kind of locations that are in more rural, beautiful natural scenery settings, small villages, things like that. I think that's the thing that's coming or is already here, but will become a bit more mainstream, at least mainstream within this niche.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there already a co-living space is growing immensely at the moment, especially after COVID. And we already have conferences and you've got a lot of people building them. And you've got a few big players already in the US and in Europe. There is a really cool company in Belgium that has some gorgeous spaces, really gorgeous. And now they expanded to Paris. And I don't remember exactly the name, but if you just check them out in Brussels, you'll find them for sure. And yeah, you've got this kind of boutique co-living spaces as well. They're probably going to be acquired at one point by the big players, but there's so many options. Yeah, I think it's going really well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we knew what the word co-living was, or maybe it didn't even exist 5 years ago. I don't know exactly, but it's a relatively new thing, and to be talking about the big players gobbling them up, that shows you how quickly this is moving.
True, and there's also another industry around that. It's about facility management and space management. I think there is a really good opportunity there for entrepreneurs to sell products to these places, like the co-working and co-living spaces, like a B2B service on how to manage the space, the tenants, the problems. I think there's a really, really good niche there to be explored.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I know you didn't have the name of the place that's the co-living that's emerging there in Belgium and elsewhere, but are there any names that do come to mind that for somebody who's kind of listening and totally unfamiliar with co-living, if they wanted to start sort of the top and say, okay, yeah, I'm going to go stay at a really nice co-living, are there any brands out there that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I used to live in the Collective in London, which is great. I mean, it's nice. Obviously, it has some issues. You're always going to have some kind of weird people or issues in the building with maintenance, but that's okay, I think in Europe, I think it's called Cohabs, the one from Brussels, from Europe. They've got a place in Paris now too. It's called Cohabs. And I think there was a nice one I've heard about in the US. It's called Common. You might know this one, but it's more like a big house, Common. So just look out for the number of rooms and all that stuff. I don't know if you like small communities or bigger communities, but the ones in the US tend to be smaller for some reason. I don't know, they're usually based they're more like flat shares. So yeah, I think that will change also. Like in New York and LA, I think you can actually live in a big block with more people if you want to. But yeah, this would be the ones. And you've got Selena, obviously, but I think Selena is pretty expensive. They have a big network in Central and South America. They've got great location. I mean, the business model is great. It's just that I don't understand why it's that expensive. I just don't know.
Yeah, affordability's got to be baked into this as well. Like you mentioned earlier with the digital nomad. I think there's a misconception sometimes that digital nomads are, the stereotypical Amazon shop owner who's making $1 million a year, or social media influencer with just tons of revenue. The average digital nomads are freelancing, making a little bit of money, and they're not meeting these multiples of thousands of euros or dollars per month.
Yeah, I mean, some of the visas are more for expats. like maybe expat couples or something like that rather than digital nomads, because as a digital nomad, in most of the cases, you're either an entrepreneur, as you're saying, or freelancing, which are not very, very stable jobs. So sometimes you're on the edge. Sometimes you're doing very well until you set up your business. So it can be quite hard. That's what I'm saying. It's risky. It's also very rewarding. Yeah, interesting aspect there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, man, this was awesome. I feel like we could probably go on for a while, but I feel like we covered quite a bit, and maybe we'll have to return to cover some of these topics a little more in depth. But this was a lot of fun, man. Thank you so much for joining the show. And once again, if you would just mention where people can go to learn more about Remote Tribe and follow you, and we'll put all those links in the show notes as well.
Yeah, sure. So if you want to check out our content, just go to remotetribe.life. If you want to check out the jobs we have, just go to remotetribe.life/remote jobs. Just Google our name, or just look us up on LinkedIn or Instagram. We're also on Twitter. We're covering all the major social media channels. Just follow us, ask us questions. Very happy to answer and to help you guys. And then Chase, yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I hope we can do another show some other time with like some really niche topics that people haven't heard about, and we can open more minds.
Let's do this. If you're listening to this, go follow Andrew on LinkedIn or social media, wherever, or just come to me and tell us what you would like for us to go deeper on. We did a very broad topic show today where we just talked about a bunch of random things that are interesting to us. But if there's something we should have gone deeper on, let us know, and we'll do a follow-up. That sounds like a lot of fun. Thanks again, Andrew, man. This was awesome. Enjoy the rest of your day. Go get another cup of coffee, and we'll get it started. Have a good one, man.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.